Greetings and hello. Homelessness is an exclusively men's issue. This is because men do not have society's support, while women do. Women easily have access to support and other resources that are only reserved for them. Men do not have the ability to get the required help they need, as it is only directed at women, leaving homeless men in a hopeless situation. This is all due to feminist incursions, with them intentionally taking resources away from men and denying them access, and giving them all to women. This is due to misandry and the contempt that society has for men. If men are not viewed as useful to women, they are discarded. This dynamic is especially at play with how it treats its most vulnerable population, men. It is due to women's inherent contempt for men, and women getting pleasure from spiting low-status men. Therefore society abandons men, in order to cater to the wants of the female population. Nearly all of the street-sleeping homeless population is male. Women are provided with shelters, and get first priority for government services and housing. Men are left on the streets with barely anything to their name. Any woman who is actively on the streets chooses to be that way. She can turn to the government or find any man to help her, as men are leaping out of themselves at an opportunity to help women. Women can find boyfriends who will lift them out of tough times. This is due to men loving women and wanting to be with them. Men value women as people, and even privilege them to the point of putting women's welfare above their own. This is very common, as men will do anything to get a girl. Through exploiting this, women can easily snap a man who will take care and do everything for her. The feminist lie of saying that women are exploited by men is a smear based on projection. It is women who exploit men for their resources without any remorse, as shown through all relationships. Men sacrifice themselves greatly to give a chance to a woman who may or may not take notice of them. This debunks any feminist claim of men wanting to abuse and take advantage of women. Whenever feminists say something, it always applies to them and is a projection meant to attack men. Women see men through the lens of usury and contempt. They have a bigoted attitude toward the male sex, and this shows through how they are willing to take advantage of men. Women in relationships use, abuse, and gaslight the male partner. They get away with doing this because society enables their privilege and thus abuse of men. This is done through the marriage contract, where the husband is held hostage through an agreement meant to privilege the woman. Secondly, women do not want to be with men, as for the aforementioned reason of seeing them as tools for their purposes. So through this, women cannot see men as fully human because men are just there to serve a purpose. One of the outcomes of this is men being disenfranchised from all aspects of society, as women deselect men who expose their misandry. This includes men not receiving help when they are at the most vulnerable point. In fact, they are punished for being low status, as women dislike men, which means they have an even greater contempt and hatred for low status men. If men fall on hard times, there is nobody to rescue them or pull them out. Men do not have the ability to have someone pick them up and give them everything, unlike how women can. Also, there are barely any shelters for homeless men. This also includes men who are victims of domestic violence or who are in abusive situations they cannot get out of. This is the misandric attitude that society has toward men, in that men's basic needs are refused if they fall on hard times. This is a hateful attack by feminists against the male sex. It exposes the core intentions of feminists, as their goal is to completely disenfranchise the male sex. The targets of this especially include low-status men, who wind up dying on the streets directly as a result of feminist bigotry. Men get no support as a result of feminist efforts to attack the male sex. Society can support all its homeless people, as evidenced by them pampering women, but it chooses to exclude the male sex out of spite. Also, feminists support misandric laws specifically targeting homeless men. These laws make it much harder to live as a homeless person, as now they have to worry about the law. In this misandric society, the law specifically is made to protect women, not men. So, men also cannot trust the police and government to protect them, as they are just gynocentric agents doing the bidding of women. They enforce these misandric policies because they are misandrists themselves, which started from them being brainwashed by their mothers. This instilled self-loathing made them hate themselves, and thus other men. They then went into positions of authority to gain status to bribe women. So any man who thinks the police are his ally is either delusional or stupid. This is exactly evidenced by the fact that they do nothing to help men, even when they are in the very most vulnerable situations, by harassing and persecuting them. Tradcons and feminists are both enabling this, as all of them are misandric. Society abandons helpless men to fend for themselves and offers no help. They do this while bending over backward to accommodate women. Women always have a place to stay due to men liking women and having an out-group bias. Unfortunately, gynocentrism dictates that other men are left behind to sleep on the streets. This is why a strong men's rights movement is needed to give men protection and have them take priority for support as they need it the most. Gynocentrism needs to be eradicated from every institution, and this does not exclude social safety nets. Gynocentrism has its claws buried in everywhere, and men need to seriously organize on a massive level to take it down. This requires a coordinated and cohesive men's rights movement, where pandering to women is outright rejected. Everywhere gynocentrism rears its head, men end up being abused, suffering, and dying as a result. Tradcons and feminists are gynocentrists, so they are an enemy to men as a whole, and express their hatred more directly toward low-status men, saying they either need to be sent to labor camps or get killed. Also, infrastructure makes it much harder for low-status men to live comfortably. Infrastructure is catered to the desires and aesthetic whims of the female sex. Thus, it cannot be efficient and simple, which will benefit men and allow more accessible movement and more housing, and thus a more stress-free lifestyle for men. Women demand that men work themselves to death, and thus demand large spaces and large distances between one location, as one sector is meant for the servant to slave away, while the other sector is meant for the nobility, the women, to enjoy themselves. Also, low-status men are deemed as dirty and filthy. This is victim blaming, as men are spat on and disenfranchised, which leads them to such situations. Women are behind such victim blaming as they have contempt for men, and their contempt is magnified toward homeless men, as they have no use for them at all. Also, low-status men who do not fit that criteria are labeled the same way because any and all methods are used to demonize men. That is the reason why there is so much stigma behind homeless men. Homeless men are victims of a misandric society, and being low-status men, females use their social dominance to disenfranchise and attack them. This leads to the point that any negative bias or views towards homeless men are because women perpetuate them. Women instill men with self-loathing at an early age and gaslight them into sacrificing themselves to serve women. The only reason why homeless men are smeared as bums is one difference. Homeless men do not have the materials to pander to women. Therefore, women have no use for them, and their hostility toward the male sex is exposed further through how they view homeless men. If a woman is homeless, she is never given such a negative stigma because of gynocentrism. Again, women are protected and pampered by society no matter their situations, because women have an in-group bias and men want to be with women. Low-status men have neither of these biases working for them and are hated for being male, plus not being able to provide for a woman. This leaves them open as one of the groups of men that are most vulnerable to attack. Therefore, homelessness is an issue exclusive to men, and men only, as it is an expression of how society views men as disposable. The only group that can and will address the issue of homelessness, which is a male-exclusive issue, is the men's rights movement. A good men's rights movement would be dedicated to wiping out gynocentrism everywhere and giving priority to men, as they are the disenfranchised class. Men have no people who support them, and must have a movement that has their backs to prevent any gynocentrism from returning to attack and abuse the male sex. Also, any feminist who focuses on the basically non-existent issue of female homeless is a purposeful derailer who wants men to suffer. Feminists derail intentionally to either thwart progress being made by men's rights activists and out of hostility. Feminism is a female supremacy movement and thus is out to give privilege to women, all while the most vulnerable population, which are men, are discarded. It does not have men's best interests in mind as it is a hate movement. The only way homelessness will be tackled is if a coherent men's rights movement emerges and begins purging gynocentrism out of society. Men need to get together to fight for their human rights and to be protected, and the only way to do so is by working together to fight gynocentrism and establish pro-male institutions.